What is going on, everybody? It is Brett. I want to talk to you today about a follow-up story and something that I find just a little bit annoying as it relates to the upcoming Harry Potter series that is going to be on HBO Max. And yes, it is once again HBO Max. Remember, it was like HBO, then it was HBO Go, then it was HBO Max, then it was just Max. Now it's HBO Max again. And as we know, that is one of the most annoying things going on in Hollywood. But what happened, guys, just the other day, they cast the main characters for the upcoming HBO Max Harry Potter series. It stars Dominic McLaughlin, Alastair Stout, and Arabella Stanton. I got the names right without even having to look for it, which I am very, very proud of myself on. Alastair Stout really is one of the greatest British names I've ever heard my entire life. I wish him and all three of these actors nothing but the best. But what we're seeing now, guys, is the politicization of everything relating to the series, because it's already been off on a bad foot because of the casting of Severus Snape being with actor Papa Essiedu, which was, of course, a race swap. And, of course, now that same conversation is happening around Arabella Stanton and the character of Hermione. And it's just interesting to me because for most of us, I think it's going to create a lot of apathy for people because of the Snape casting, because of how integral his role was to the movies and to the books especially. But with everything going on, what I find interesting is that there's these weird, disparate ideas coming out where on one side, they're acknowledging that a lot of these actors are going to get crap from the media, but they're not being honest about who's going to be giving them that crap, because a great portion of this is going to come from the legacy media, who has a very strong dislike for J.K. Rowling because of her views on trans issues, which is something completely separate from the series. It also makes very little sense to me because on its face, she has said that she doesn't have a whole lot to do with this series to begin with, other than being a producer. Now, I don't know how much I actually believe that, given the fact that she has, for the most part, always been she's held on very tightly to her properties, and she wants them to do well. Now, she's made a lot of changes that people don't always agree with. Obviously, the number 1 and 2 being the kind of rewritten history around the character of Dumbledore and making him gay after the fact. And then, of course, the casting of they cast a black actress as Hermione in the Harry Potter stage play, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. But usually when it comes to stuff on the stage, like, it's just not going to get the attention that stuff on the big screen gets it. And a streaming series that reportedly, according to Daily Mail, no follow-up sources, is going to spend $75 million an episode. Something tells me that is not right, and I have a feeling that number is going to change later, but that's absolutely insane. But that is the big screen in and of itself for the theater, and a property the size of Harry Potter is going to get a lot of coverage. So race swaps on the big screen, or with a project as big as this undertaking, making 7 seasons of these books, is going to get a whole lot of kind of pushback from the media and from everybody else. So there was this article from Forbes from Paul Tassi, which it had some stuff in it that I disagreed with, and some stuff that on its face I feel like he points out things that actually explain to you why. He makes the point of saying that most of the time in Hollywood, race swaps that happen aren't legitimate casting complaints. And if you've watched this channel for any length, you understand that I am one of those people that I don't care as much as other people do, mainly because for the other people, it's a little bit more close to the vest, especially if it's a property you grew up loving to watch or to read. You're going to care about it more aptly. But it never bothered me when they race swapped Aquaman. It didn't bother me when they race swapped Nick Fury. It just didn't. Another one that people seem to really enjoy in the last couple of years was the character of Jim Gordon, and that was another, in the Batman. And I almost called him Felix Leiter. It's not Felix Leiter. That's who that actor played in in James Bond. The point being that there are examples of it working, but on its face, race swaps are a distraction, and I want to get into it why with this article. So this is what he says. HBO finally announced who will play its core cast members, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, in the upcoming Harry Potter series, which is based off the hit book series. The film's rocketed its core cast to stardom. Now fans fear culture war backlash for a few of the cast roles, namely Papa Essiedu as who has been cast as Severus Snape, and now young Arabella Stanton as the Hermione Granger character. Essiedu is black, and while Stanton looks almost exactly like a young Emma Watson, but with different skin tone, and that's enough to cause unfortunate controversy. Yes, okay, so here's the thing. He's going to get into it later, but the whole point is that aspects of the story are going to fundamentally need to be changed because of the race swaps. And again, we're going to restate this endlessly as this comes out. I will never fault an actor for taking a role. It is a business. It is a job. It is what they do for a living. And if they want to make money doing it, it is not their job to shepherd forward the best version of the project. It is the writer's job. It is the showrunner's job. It is the people's funding its job. It's who has control of the IP's job. Now, people get mad and they say they're making it worse by doing so. Well, in a lot of ways, look, that's capitalism, baby. That's what happens when you put it out on the open market, and these people with their own ideological beliefs decide to hire someone based on their own criteria. And if it loses an audience, if the shows, crash and burn and nobody watches it, so be it. That's on them. They did that to themselves. I shed no tears for them if the shows and the movies bomb. Doesn't matter to me, but it doesn't bother me the way that it's going to bother other actors. And I loved the Harry Potter books growing up, but the descriptions of the character are apt and obvious. So when it's done specifically to a character like Snape and to a character like Hermione, which we'll get into with the discussion of the topic of mudbloods and what that means in magic, and now they're trying to make a racial, ethnic allegory to that doesn't need to be there because it wasn't there in the original, which he, Paul Tassi himself points out in this article. So let's continue. The accusation of race-swapping characters who were originally white are frequent in media and as a whole not legitimate casting complaints. Bullshit. Anything that people deem necessary to criticize for the portrayal of a character is a valid casting complaint. There are plenty of actors who look exactly like a character, who get hired to play a character, who don't do that role justice. You're just mad because this one specifically falls along progressive lines and you don't like it. So I disagree with you 100%. And the other thing here is that you're going to then bend over backwards to discuss how these race swaps are going to fundamentally change, aspects of the story. So he says they're not legitimate casting complaints as a whole. However, in this case raises questions about how specific bits of source material will be handled given the events that took place in the books and films, as well as how those characters might take on new, unforeseen racial dynamics with this casting. See, that's the thing. You want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to be able to make the swaps when you deem it to be prudent. And look, I get that argument. I've made that argument before. The argument that I used to make often was like, look, if racial identity isn't relevant to the story that you're telling, then I guess I don't really care. The other argument that I'll always make is that if you cast a big enough actor in the race swap, it doesn't matter what direction it's going, it's not going to matter to the normies whether it's accurate or not. But the thing is, with Harry Potter, there are less normies. A lot of people are diehard fans and don't just read the books but consume all the material. This isn't obscure comic characters that you want to race swap for the sake of progressive ideology, where most people just don't know what Aquaman looked like before, who didn't know previous versions of these characters. Think about Valkyrie or Heimdall. Like, look, just because a bunch of people don't know them doesn't mean that there aren't people that are going to care. But when it comes to Harry Potter, the pool of people who know and who care is going to be much more vast than the people who you are kind of trying to pull the wool over the eyes of when you race and gender swap less known characters from lesser known franchises. At least that's just my opinion. So he continues. For Essiedu Snape, his story eventually leads to the revelation that he was relentlessly bullied by James back in the 70s, hung upside down with magic at one point, and pining after Lily, James's eventual wife. That bullying and love triangle, I mean, calling it a love triangle is like she's friends with Snape. Like, The bullying and love triangle takes on a new dimension of with Esidu being one of the only cast members of color, as now it's confirmed that that will not be the case with either Potter parent. It's an uncomfortable dynamic when you think about how it's going to play out on screen. Yes, it is. So asking yourself that question, then you ask yourself, why did the studio not ask this question? Why did the casting directors not ask themselves this question? Did they not familiarize themselves with the source material enough? Is this actual evidence that J.K. Rowling really just isn't interested in what is going on with this show? Because it could be. Or is she interested and just doesn't care how this fundamentally changes the material that she wrote? So for Hermione, we're going to get into awkward territory where there is an entire storyline about her starting a movement to free house elves from slavery, something that's laughed off by everyone else as a dumb cause. Past that, Hermione is a frequent target of attacks about her genealogy. She's called a mudblood, a slur for her non-magical parents producing a magic child, but calling a young, non-white girl a mudblood seems different in this context. Yes, because you're looking at it from a modern 21st century American culture. Again, even though the article is the show takes place in Britain, obviously you're writing about this from an American perspective on these things. So you ask yourself, why make these changes at all? It is the case that the House Elf storyline was already cut from the films because there was just not enough time to include it as a side story, not for controversial reasons. So they did, of course, include Dobby getting accidentally freed as part of the movies, which, of course, they're one of the biggest concerns with the movies that a lot of people had was like, it kind of relied a lot on your knowledge of the books because stuff would be just like thrown in there randomly, and if you read the books you were able to follow along perfectly, but if you were not a fan of the books, then a lot of it would seem very incongruous and just feel like they were jumping from scene to scene to scene because your brain wasn't filling in the gaps of the story like the people who'd read the book. So it says, as for Hermione being attacked for her heritage and Snape being bullied by James Potter, that seems harder to get around. One argument is that they can claim that all of this is actually a metaphor for racial injustice in that Harry Potter is being smart and progressive with that commentary, but it's impossible to believe that was ever the actual intent of the story. Sure, the Malfoys are in effect more or less pure-blood Aryan stand-ins, but this is also a series that had almost no minority characters at all and none in major roles. Yes! You are proving the point why making changes ends up being a minefield from beginning to end. So by your logic, you're supposed to change more of the characters to fit modern progressive storytelling to undo problems you created by making specific casting choices that didn't need to be made to begin with. Again, I will state, most of the time with this stuff, it's not going to matter to a lot of people depending on the franchise because most people aren't necessarily ones who have read or know the previous source material. They're just looking for a movie that's fun and enjoyable. But the second that you did this with the Snape character, you turned a lot of people off something like this. And this is a project that you have to be successful with for many, many years to come. It's weird. I don't think that any of these swaps need to happen. I don't know if people are actually going to care about the Hermione race swap. I don't care. I'm guessing, in effect, a lot of people won't care. And let's face it, I think that most people, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, leave the kids alone. They didn't make this, you know, they're there to do a job. The adult is there to do a job. You should leave Papa Esidu alone. Again, they are there. They were hired to do a job. It is the studio. It is the writers. It is the showrunner. All of them are the ones who are making this a needlessly more complicated problem than it needed to be. I find that very, very interesting given the fact that it's not like Warner Brothers is doing the greatest right now. Again, they have just switched the name on HBO again to back to HBO Max. They are not having the best luck when it comes to their streaming service and getting things off the ground. There are all sorts of issues going on. I listen to more than a few people who have their criticisms of David Zaslav, though I do give David Zaslav a lot of credit for annoying all the right people because he seems to piss a lot of people off in a way that I find absolutely hilarious. But let's not kid ourselves. Harry Potter is a franchise that should be bolstering and growing their business, not causing them unneeded stress with a new project. The same thing sort of happened with Hogwarts Legacy, the video game, where trans activists made life miserable for all sorts of people and called you a Nazi if you played a video game about Harry Potter. In this case, sticking close to the casting would have been a surefire way to keep people on board. Look, millennial nostalgia is a very, very powerful thing, especially if they want this to be something that includes their families. If you look at the success of the live action Lilo and Stitch that just came out, that is powered by the fact that millennials grew up watching Lilo and Stitch and brought their kids to see the live action version in the theaters. This could have been, in effect, Warner Brothers' own version of that with this series, and it could have been a license to print money. Instead, it's something with an unsure future for everyone involved. So make of all that what you will. They have caused problems for themselves that they never needed to cause for themselves in the first place. I do want to reiterate that leave the actors alone. They took a job. It's what they do. If you want to hold someone responsible, you should tweet at Warner Brothers and tell them that what they're doing is stupid, because it's so obvious the mistakes they're making. But if I was to give you any advice at all, I'd say, look, don't lose sleep over it. For the most part, we're all just trying to get on with our lives. There's a lot of power in just letting this stuff roll off your back. But, you know, that's my thoughts on the matter. Let me know down below, guys. Are you excited for the upcoming Harry Potter series? I do hope that they've got these kids some good media training. I hope they've prepared them for the crap storm that's going to come on all sides from everyone, just by the virtue of J.K. Rowling being the lightning rod for controversy that she is, given her views on transgenderism, and the series itself and the changes that they're making being a lightning rod for controversy from people who feel that the media, or I'm sorry, for people who believe that Hollywood has taken advantage of their kindness just a few too many times. Let me know down below what you think of it. Do you think the series is going to do well? I saw a lot of people predicting that they think that this show is 3 seasons and it's done. I don't believe that's possible. I think that with they're betting the farm on this one, and they're going to get all 7 seasons out of it, and we're going to see what they do with it. If this is going to be their game, is this going to be their Game of Thrones, their new Game of Thrones, I guess, given that it's Warner Brothers? Will this be their new Game of Thrones, or will this be their Rings of Power? Let me know down below. What do you think? If you don't know, guys, the podcast is Pop Culture Crisis. We are live Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is, of course, noon Pacific. We are on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, and Spotify. If you like to listen to podcasts, I don't know why you would if you're watching this on YouTube, but you should check us out Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. See you there, guys. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media, and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.